Finding the tomb of Alexander is the dream of every archaeologist.
There's earthquakes, tsunamis, riots in the street. There are no more descriptions of this beautiful royal city. Alexander's tomb goes missing.
A tomb engulfed by a city that had grown up around it became nothing more than a myth for more than 2 millennia. But all changed after the discovery of a huge tomb under the rubble of contemporary Alexandria. It was opened by scientists. What they discovered was unsettling as much as it was unusual. Did something far worse begin here, or was this the final chapter of a mystery that had lasted centuries? In the depths of the room, an unnoticed detail is causing everyone to wonder unanswered questions. What happens when the past won't remain buried is the central theme here, not history per se. When workmen unearthed a huge ancient building beneath the main streets of Alexandria, Egypt's Sidi Ghaber area, in July 2018, a seemingly ordinary construction project took a surprising turn. In the course of laying the groundwork for a new structure, they encountered a rough surface that would later reveal itself to be the top of a massive black granite tomb. The sarcophagus had been sealed and untouched for more than 2 millennia. It was around 9 feet long, more than 5 feet broad, and 6 feet high, and it weighed about 30 tons. It was one of the most astonishing recent archaeological discoveries in Egypt due to its size, location, and lack of opening. A media frenzy and a deluge of conjecture ensued almost immediately after the discovery. Because of how close the site was to ancient Alexandria, the city that Alexander the Great constructed and called for himself, speculation quickly spread that the fabled Macedonian conqueror's long-lost tomb had been located. Could this be the last resting place of a mysterious individual from history? This query was splashed across headlines worldwide. After more than 2 millennia, was the long-standing mystery of Alexander the Great's lost tomb finally about to be solved? While historians and archaeologists were cautiously skeptical, social media was abuzz with enthusiasm and wild speculation. Everyone was on the edge of their seat as the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities unveiled the sarcophagus. Surprisingly, 3 human remains were discovered within. 2 men and a woman's remains seemed to have been submerged in the opaque brownish-red liquid. Supposedly, the stench emanating from this confined room was a concoction of decades of water seepage, maybe combined with sewage and partially decayed organic materials. Upon first inspection, no signs of inscriptions, artifacts, or royal emblems were detected, which are often linked to burial practices of the aristocracy or royal family. Researchers were so forced to wonder who the inhumed individuals were and what their status was. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence linking the tomb to Alexander, the finding did bring up intriguing concerns. Who were these people who didn't appear to be royal that warranted the construction of such a massive tomb? Could this be the repurposing of a tomb for an altogether different person? One who may have been more significant. The contents fluid were removed for analysis. There have been several references to cursed juice on the internet, but no evidence of a supernatural component has been found. Despite the fact that the tomb did not reveal Alexander's final resting place, it did reignite popular interest in ancient Alexandria and highlight the immense amount of history concealed beneath the streets of modern-day Alexandria. Concerns over the missing items and the mystery surrounding their disappearance surfaced at the same time as the euphoria around their discovery reached its zenith. Where has Alexander's tomb gone? The grave of Alexander the Great was one of the most sacred locations in antiquity for many decades after his death in 323 BCE. His tomb was moved from Memphis, Egypt, to Alexandria, the city he had created and which he had hoped would serve as a cultural lighthouse, according to historical records. According to ancient accounts, the tomb was an impressive edifice befitting a man revered as both a conqueror and a deity. Legend has it that it formerly served as a public monument where emperors, nobles, and pilgrims might come to pay their respects to one of the most powerful monarchs in history, find inspiration, or even gain legitimacy. The tomb stood as a powerful and vulnerable emblem of power and death for almost 600 years. Alexander was highly esteemed by Roman rulers in particular. It is reported that during his expedition in Egypt in 48 BCE, Julius Caesar sobbed upon viewing the corpses of the conqueror. The first Roman emperor, Augustus, supposedly ordered the tomb to be opened so he could see the body after visiting it after defeating Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Reportedly, he did this to the mummified corpse's nose, a little but significant detail that shows how physically accessible the tomb was back then. The place is also said to have been visited by other famous Romans, including as Septimius Severus and Caligula. The fact that Alexander's tomb was still well known and revered during the Roman imperial period is attested to by these recurrent references. Strange and inexplicable illusions abruptly stop appearing, beginning in the 4th century AD. This abrupt stillness has baffled historians for generations. A number of hypotheses have been put out to explain the tomb's disappearance. Natural disasters like earthquakes or floods could have caused damage or destruction, according to some. Others believe that throughout the process of Christianizing the empire, several pagan temples were either desecrated or concealed, such as Alexander's tomb. Perhaps because of his own magnificence, Alexander became entangled in the sweeping transition that occurred during that era's theological revolution, which sought to eradicate all traces of previous faiths. Alexandria has experienced tremendous urban reconstruction in the previous 2,000 years, adding to the enormous mystery of the tomb's location. Subterranean archaeological sites have been buried under modern streets, buildings, and communities. The current city likely built over or somehow altered what little remains of Alexander's tomb as the ancient capital expanded. The precise location of the tomb has remained a mystery, despite much research by historians and archaeologists. An epoch consumed by time, power, and stone, the tomb's disappearance is one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in archaeology. One of the most remarkable political and military campaigns in history came to a halt with Alexander the Great's unexpected death in 323 BCE. Alexander the Great passed away in Babylon at the young age of 32, following a short but severe illness. It is still debatable if poison, typhoid disease, or malaria was the reason. The one certainty, though, is that Alexander did not leave behind an obvious heir. Even though he was expecting a child with his wife Roxana, the unborn child had no legal right to the throne at the time. His senior generals, the Diadochi, became embroiled in a power struggle due to his lack of leadership, and soon began to turn on one another in an effort to gain control of the enormous empire that extended from Greece to India. A symbolic conflict involving Alexander's body ensued, along with a territorial struggle. The political and spiritual significance of possessing the body of a respected leader was substantial in ancient times. The oracle at Siwa had declared Alexander to be divine, and many people had acknowledged this fact during his lifetime. As a result, his bones were considered hallowed rather than human. By touching his corpse, one might feel the weight of his power and legitimacy. The funeral procession turned into an imperial strategic issue, instead of a heartfelt farewell, since every commander understood this. Just as the voyage to the Siwa oasis in Egypt, the location of Alexander's desired burial, was about to commence, it was abruptly halted. The pivotal incident occurred when Ptolemy, a trusted commander of Alexander's and the future founder of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, mounted a daring coup. Because Ptolemy redirected the golden sarcophagus's burial procession in Syria to Memphis, the former Egyptian capital, as it was leaving Babylon. Deliberate hijacking is the only way to describe this abomination. By bringing the body of the conqueror into Egypt, Ptolemy solidified his position as the rightful ruler. not just via military might, but also by divine connection. Under the sway of Alexander's tradition, Ptolemy built his bloodline upon Memphis, and, subsequently, Alexandria. This action may have been the beginning of a metamorphosis in which his body became a symbol for others to use in asserting their authority over him. Transforming Alexander into a symbol, one that others might use to impose their authority, began with the redirection of the tomb away from his declared spiritual goal, which was a violation of his dying aspirations. As a result of Ptolemy's move, posthumous images about Alexander will center on Egypt, not Macedonia or Babylon. Ptolemy established a dynasty that is expected to last for about 300 years after he seized the body, thereby appropriating the story. The unmet burial request of Alexander the Great is one of the many symbolically significant mysteries surrounding his death. According to historical records, Alexander asked to be laid to rest at the hallowed temple of Zeus Ammon in the Siwa Oasis, a distant location in the western desert of Egypt. He had gone there to see the oracle years ago, and that trip had changed who he was. According to legend, the oracle welcomed him with the title of Son of Zeus Ammon, confirming the heavenly position he had started to assert. Not content to be remembered as a conqueror or king, but as a semi-divine character destined to transcend mortal boundaries, this proclamation became crucial to Alexander's self-perception and legacy. Both the Egyptians and the Greeks placed great religious importance on the Siwa temple. It was sacred territory that connected two worlds that Alexander had conquered and hoped to unite, and it symbolized the ideal resting spot for him. Isolated and inaccessible in the desert, the sanctuary would have been an ideal location for a burial that was both spiritually meaningful and politically neutral. Alexander aspired to solidify his reputation as a monarch and divinity amidst the windswept dunes and the murmurs of old gods. Having a tomb in Siwa would have had a dual purpose, as a physical location for his burial and as a sacred memorial to his mythology, which has persisted throughout history, and as a means of solidifying his sense of divinity. When Alexander died, did his empire start to fall into disarray? Similarly, his funeral arrangements were buried by unbridled political ambition. The Diadochi were more concerned with gaining power for Alexander's generals than with helping him fulfill his religious desires. In his haste to claim his legacy, Ptolemy diverted the funeral procession away from the desert temple and towards the political center of Egypt, namely Alexandria, after intercepting it on its route. In order to suit the requirements of his new rule, Ptolemy rewrote the narrative by denying Alexander his rightful burial. The once divine Siwa Oasis became a mere footnote in the epic tale of a lost inheritance as it became politically charged. This departure from Alexander's final desires has sparked discussion for centuries. What probably would have transpired if the corpse had made it to Siwa? Might the location have been covered up by the passage of time or perhaps eliminated on purpose? To this day, historians and archaeologists scour long-lost manuscripts and documents for clues. The narrative is tinged with an eerie feeling of unresolved business by the disturbing notion that maybe Alexander was denied his desired burial site. The mystery of Siwa will continue to tantalize as an echo of what could have been and what was never permitted to be, as long as the actual resting place of the great Alexander is concealed. For decades, under the watchful eye of Greek archaeologist Calliope Papacosta, an understated but dogged archaeological project has been taking place underneath the contemporary streets of Alexandria. Finding Alexander the Great's long-lost tomb has been Papacosta's life's work as director of the Hellenic Institute for the Research of Alexandrian Civilization. Her strategy stands out because it combines historical rigor with current scientific methods, in contrast to the numerous prior attempts to locate the tomb, all of which have failed. Her research has focused on a region that, under modern-day housing and abandoned public areas, is thought to have been a portion of ancient Alexandria's royal quarters. Electrical resistivity tomography, ERT, is one of the state-of-the-art technologies used by Papacosta's team. It's a non-invasive technique that lets them look underneath the surface of cities without damaging any infrastructure. This method involves injecting electrical currents into the earth in order to create a map of any abnormalities that may be present under the surface, such as hidden chambers, voids, walls, or tunnels. Alexandria is a city whose history is buried beneath asphalt and concrete from centuries of building and devastation. Therefore, these instruments are priceless. Her team has discovered substantial architectural remnants through meticulous surveys and focused excavations, which point to the existence of subterranean, colossal complexes. Excavated from the undulating grounds of Shalalat Gardens, the partially intact marble sculpture was widely believed to lie above what had previously been the royal area of the old city, which adds to the discovery's splendor. The sculpture, which has seen better days, is a potent example of Hellenistic style, with its typical flowing draperies, aristocratic stance, and slightly lowered head. Using such terms also brings to mind the commonplace portrayals of Alexander the Great in art, which often have stylized hairstyles and idealized facial expressions. Papacosta said, "I prayed to God to see the way the hand turned," implying that she was overjoyed on the day of its discovery and privately hoped it had previously carried a spear, a phrase that has classical iconographic significance for Alexander. The overall spatial arrangement suggests a layout for something more complicated than just artistic artifacts. This lines up with the corridor alignments, the finding of channels that may have carried water, and the proximity to what is thought to have been a sacred pool, all of which hint to a sacred area associated with religious or funeral ceremonies. According to what is known about ancient Greek and Egyptian rituals, water served as both a symbol and a means of cleansing in ancient funeral ceremonies. Despite this, no definitive tomb has been located. Nonetheless, Papacosta's findings provide credence to the idea that beneath the feet of contemporary Alexandrians is a sanctuary that may contain either Alexander's remains or a significant cultic site dedicated to him. Similar to how one location hinted at a royal mystery under Alexandria, another will eventually reveal an even stranger and more unsettling discovery. The discovery of a large black granite tomb in the Sidi Gabr neighborhood of Alexandria in July 2018 captivated people all over the globe. This mausoleum was 9 feet long, over 6 feet tall, and weighed over 30 tons, making it the largest burial container of its day. The thick coating of masonry had sealed it, and it had lain undisturbed for almost 2 millennia. The sarcophagus was obviously custom-built for a notable person or people, given its exceptional size and level of craftsmanship. Because of its position in a city that has a long association with Alexander the Great, its mere presence, buried beneath a current building site, immediately sparked a storm of conjecture. Unexpected and disturbing things were discovered within the sarcophagus when scientists from Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities opened it. They found the remains of 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman, rather than a single dignitary or regal figure. One of the skulls showed indications of blunt force damage, probably from a sharp object or weapon, according to preliminary examination. This fact prompted others to speculate that the people in the picture may have been troops, victims of a massacre, or executed prisoners. Multiple bodies in such an ornate coffin further added to the mystique and cast doubt on the common perception of elite tombs from the late Ptolemaic and early Roman eras. The lack of distinguishing characteristics only served to heighten the air of intrigue. There were no inscriptions, amulets, crowns, weapons, or funeral writings discovered within the tomb that may reveal the identity of the buried. There were just a few shards of fabric, a few pieces of rotted earthenware, and a few specks of gold leaf. These clues didn't point to the deceased's identification or position. It was as if everything had been stolen, repurposed quickly, or intentionally made anonymous, rather than being brimming with markers of authority and heritage. Professionals were perplexed as to the historical significance of this burial due to the striking disparity between the sarcophagus and the naked tomb. One of the most shocking aspects of the discovery was a reddish-brown liquid that filled up much of the sarcophagus's base. After some investigation, it was found to be a mixture of sewage water, ground seepage, and decomposing organic debris, rather than embalming fluid as first suspected. Regardless, many people speculated online about the source of the eerie atmosphere and the terrible smell. Some mockingly referred to it as cursed juice, suggesting that a pandemic may be released upon opening the casket. Some thought it would indicate a long-lost preservation method that was ultimately unsuccessful. Although additional testing were carried out on the liquid, no conclusive results were obtained. The public and some scholars have speculated that the Black Granite Tomb's true narrative may remain undiscovered due to the lack of definitive answers. The 2012 discovery of a massive burial site in northern Greece, close to the ancient city of Amphipolis, captivated historians and archaeologists worldwide. Dating back to the late 4th century BCE, the same era as Alexander the Great's death, this enormous edifice, known as the Kasta tomb, ranks as the biggest tomb ever unearthed in Greece. The tomb is unparalleled in size among burial sites of its time, with a circumference extending over 500 meters. A person or organization of outstanding importance was likely the intended recipient of its opulence and meticulous engineering. Theorizing its possible connection to Alexander's regal Argead dynasty began with its magnitude alone. The Kasta tomb uncovered a plethora of artistic and architectural features seldom seen in one place as the excavations continued. Two legendary beasts thought to be guarding the entrance to the tomb were stone sphinxes. At another entrance, two beautifully sculptured caryatids, female figures used as columns, stood guard, adding to the ceremonial nature of the tomb. Also discovered was the mosaic floor with intricate details showing Hades capturing Persephone, a story that frequently represents the cycle of life and death, and the descent into Hades. There was some thought put into these creative decisions, like the mythical persona Alexander worked to establish for himself while alive. Their suggestions hinted at a burial steeped in religious symbolism and maybe divine or regal connotations. The discovery of 5 bodies in the inner sanctuary had piqued the interest of archaeologists. That of a lady over 60, 2 males, 35 to 45 years younger, a baby, and a 5th whose bones had been incinerated. Artifacts discovered included a wooden coffin, parts of a golden ornament, and a number of weapon fragments. The range of burial practices suggests that the few found bones may have been interred in either a dynasty family tomb or a repurposed one. Curiously, a complex characterized by burial and cremation has emerged at a time when questions about identities and motivations for being on the same sacred land arise. References to emblems of the Argead dynasty in their invitation are more captivating than anything else regarding the Kasta tomb. Images of stars, rosettes, and Macedonian shields adorned the walls, all of which were inseparably linked to Alexander's regal lineage. The burial's occupant remains a mystery, although experts agree that it might be someone from Alexander's closest circle, such as his mother Olympias, his close friend Hephaestion, or a strong commander. The lavishness of the tomb, its symbolic significance, and its proximity to important events have kept it in the limelight as one of the most probable locations linked to the lasting legacy of the Macedonian, even if there are no conclusive connections to Alexander himself. A strictly limited excavation in Alexandria allegedly opened an alabaster tomb unlike any previously found in the region, in a development that subtly reverberated across archaeological circles. Underneath a section of the city that has long been thought to contain the city's royal quarter, the sarcophagus was found sealed with a thick, amber-colored glue and completely free of inscriptions and identifying signs. Rumors quickly spread that something remarkable had been discovered because to the secrecy surrounding the excavation, which included limited press access, no formal statement, and rigorous government monitoring. Those in the know about the dig hinted that the discovery could have something to do with one of the biggest mysteries of all time, where Alexander the Great was laid to rest. The unusually well-preserved corpse of a man, said to have died in his early 30s, coincidentally, the same age at which Alexander the Great passed away, lay within the alabaster casket. Leaked documents quote unidentified sources who state that the body showed symptoms of a life lived through battle. A healed wound at the base of the neck, extensive scarring on the ribcage, and an ancient leg fracture. These specifics are in line with what is known about the wounds that Alexander suffered during his missions, particularly the fact that he was almost killed in India. The physical evidence alone was enough to startle the archaeological community and stir speculation that the elusive tomb had finally been located, even though no official DNA testing results had been revealed. This only served to heighten the mystery surrounding the body's apparent embalming process, which was far more sophisticated than anything known in the late 4th century BCE. Experts in the field who were able to remark on the find described it as a kind of hybrid that incorporated both the more typical patterns of Egyptian mummification and maybe some chemical preservatives that are not mentioned in any of the modern literature. Perhaps this was a method being tested out for the first time or was created for an unusual reason, perhaps for a beloved person, given the exceptional level of preservation. The unusual ingredients found in the sarcophagus's sealing glue raised the idea that it was an effort to hide or protect the body from subsequent discovery or sacrilege, especially given the period's royal funerals. The artifacts discovered with the corpse were perhaps the most interesting. Among the meager belongings were pieces of an imperially beautiful golden crown, and one of those pieces was a medallion of Zeus Ammon, the god whom Alexander had claimed as his own upon his arrival at the Siwa oasis. Since these artifacts were found in the tomb, some scholars have speculated that it was built or altered with the express purpose of housing a person of divine lineage. Despite the lack of official confirmation, this discovery has reignited the worldwide discussion about whether Alexander's tomb has finally been found or if its location has been known for some time. In the wake of the shocking recovery of a lifeless person inside an alabaster coffin during a limited dig in Alexandria, whispers started to circulate regarding an attempt to cover up the results. Rumor has it that DNA samples were extracted from the bones and compared to known genetic markers found in Macedonian royal tombs, according to early internal reports. Reports from within the operation suggested several striking parallels, which may have connections to the Argead dynasty, which Alexander the Great's family was a part of. Still, news stopped coming in all of a sudden while people were waiting for official scientific findings. Researchers working on the study ceased conducting interviews completely, and weeks went by with no information. Nobody had expected there to be such an abrupt quiet. Within a few months following the finding, outside observers were denied access to the site, and the location was shut off under heavy security. International academic institutions' requests to work together on further analyses were either disregarded or flat-out rejected. Because of this cover-up, rumors began to circulate that the results would have politically or historically sensitive consequences. Confirming the body's identification as Alexander the Great, according to some experts, might set off a chain reaction of disputes over cultural artifacts, not just between Egypt and Greece, but among the archaeological community at large. According to others, This kind of discovery has the potential to shake up established accounts of religion, empire, and national identity in history. More conjecture has been added to the mix with claims of a locked vault near a primary burial chamber. Leaked architectural scans indicate that this vault has not been opened yet. If there is indeed such a room, why it has remained secret is anybody's guess. Some insiders claim structural instability is to blame for the lack of exploration, while others say bureaucratic reluctance is to blame, forcing them to move forward only with a unified scientific front. But the concept chamber under Alexandria, which may contain more artifacts, records, or perhaps corpses, has piqued the imagination of academics and media outlets throughout the world. Curious as to whether this undiscovered vault holds any genuine evidence of Alexander's burial or what happened to his remains, it may be the final one. The public's mistrust and the popularity of conspiracy theories have been exacerbated by official secrecy. Some have hypothesized that this is all part of a larger cover-up effort, with the stated goal of preventing or postponing discoveries that may cause a paradigm shift in historical thinking or exacerbate geopolitical tensions. Although Egyptian officials have remained silent in the face of the mounting uproar, their inaction over the excavation has been more obvious than any statement they have made. The ramifications of what could have been discovered were only just starting to reverberate beyond the tomb itself, even as the site was shut up and inquiries were stopped. More than just a historical footnote, the finding of Alexander the Great's actual tomb has the potential to modify the cultural identities of nations who can trace their heritage to his kingdom and change our knowledge of ancient history. The conclusion of an extraordinary military campaign was signaled by Alexander the Great's death in 323 BCE, but the historical record has been shrouded in obscurity surrounding his ultimate resting place. Finding and verifying the location of his tomb might give light on his life, death, and burial rituals. Even more importantly, it would make historians rethink the story that has been built up over the years, which might lead to new perspectives on the Hellenistic world and what it left behind. Never has Alexander's legend completely died off. Many political and military leaders, philosophers, and military thinkers have held him up as an example of ambition, strategy, and power from the Renaissance forward. In addition to being firmly ingrained in the history of Egypt and Persia, he is intricately intertwined with the national identities of North Macedonia and Greece. The development of empires and international military doctrine have both been impacted by his legacy. Leadership, intelligence, and conquering are still taught in present times based on his biography. Particularly among nations that lay claim to portions of his tale, a conclusive finding of his tomb may rekindle arguments over cultural ownership and historical veracity. Opening Alexander's tomb, according to some academics and religious observers, would do more than just confirm historical records. It might directly cast doubt on beliefs that have grown to be fundamental to some traditions. Alexander the Great is one of the few historical figures who seems to occupy, to varied degrees, the space where the Greek and Egyptian conceptions of divine devotion meet with the realities of everyday life. On the other hand, if proof were to surface demonstrating a divine element connected to burial symbols or rituals, it would raise doubts about the relevance of ancient deification processes to subsequent religious activities. Concerns have been voiced that the search for answers may lead to the debunking of Alexander's myth, leaving behind little more than a story of bones and dust. Like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of history's biggest mysteries if you were as captivated and unnerved as we were by this tale. Do you have any ideas or views regarding Alexander's tomb? Just drop them below and we'll read them all. Plus, stay put. To continue delving into the mysteries the ancient world left behind, click the video that appears next on your screen.